and welcome here to TalkFCB, and welcome back to the channel here today, guys, and welcome to a brand new week, and that's the most important thing here. Today we're going to be talking about what a lot of Barca's problems are. We're going to be illustrating where things are going wrong right now for Hansi Flick's team, and most importantly as well, we're going to have some of the real debates within the Barca fan base right now, and I really want your thoughts on each and every one of them. And of course, we are going to start to talk about the Champions League and Barca's huge meeting against Borussia Dortmund, and why now, more than ever, is that game so important to us. It is all on the way for you. Get ready and let's do it. Because first things first, guys, we have some great super thanks shout-outs here today and some real positivity from Jawad, first of all, who highlights the performance of Lamine Yamal. Even despite the draw, he was the bright spark on an otherwise difficult day for Barca. And here, Abdul feels that even despite the late collapse from us, Barca can actually take some real positives from the game in the way that we were able to navigate the Real Betis press there. Do you agree with that, guys? And thank you indeed for the great support there on the super thanks. But we do have to start with a few of my concerns right now about what we're seeing, not only in the last game from Barca, but looking here over the past few weeks. Of course, in La Liga, we've won once in our last 5 games. So quite clearly here, it's not just a one-game thing, it's not just a one-off day. There are problems within this team that we have really started to see rise to the surface over these past games. And for me, one of the important things to point out is that we are struggling to win difficult games. And by that, I don't mean against difficult teams. I mean the really awkward, tricky, scrappy, close, ugly games. Those are the ones that we're struggling in right now. Because earlier on in the season, don't forget, we didn't need to worry about close games at all. We didn't need to worry about that entire situation because our games were never close enough to become difficult, to become scrappy and ugly. But right now, we are not seeing that same consistency. We are not seeing Barca constantly blow teams away. And we're being involved here in more scraps, in more fights. And we're not really coming out on top. Because what we're seeing right now from this Barca team is either what we saw, for instance, against Mallorca, whereby as that game went on, we took it away from them. We won by a very convincing scoreline in the end. Or we're just falling flat, and there's no in between. We are either winning by a big scoreline, and we're thinking this is great, we're on a great path, or we are simply collapsing and dropping really important points along the way. I think especially here, over the course of a league season, a very long campaign, of course, your consistency is going to be really tested. You need some middle ground to fall back on, because you're not always going to be outstanding in every single game. There are different factors, different variables that come into play over the course of a long season, so you need something there to fall back on. When you're not at your peak, when you're not at your very A game, you need something else, and we are struggling to find that sort of middle ground right now, because I think here, if you look at the second half against Real Betis here, in terms of the shots, in terms of the pressure that each of the teams faced, we had 3 shots in the second half against Betis, and that was it. And you look at what Betis were doing down the other end there. It was almost an onslaught. They really did ramp up the pressure. They really were taking shot after shot after shot at us, and we were struggling to respond. And that's the thing right now, because again, looking back at the start of the season, we were taking punches. We were rolling with the punches. We were saying to teams, okay, you might have a few shots here and there, you might put a bit of pressure on us, but we will respond in our own way. We will use our own weapons to then tip the game on its head and then put you on the back foot. But the problem now is we're not being able to do that. We're not showing that anywhere near as much. Betis started to enter into the game in that second half, and we never stopped that threat. We never eased the pressure on ourselves, and we didn't put it on them. And this is not a one-off, because you look at the game as well against Celta Vigo, whereby, again, in the second half, we fall away. They start putting the pressure on, and we cannot respond. And there's almost a feeling right now, in these kinds of games, of an inevitability that these teams are going to get back in the game, that they're going to have chances to get back in the game. And Barca, again, mentally, the question marks are there. We are letting leads slip, we are giving away games, giving away points, and we are starting to see more and more teams putting pressure on us, and we are not able to respond. But that's the thing though, guys, because what on earth has happened then? What on earth has happened to this team whereby so much has changed, it seems like, in a very short space of time? Barca went from playing excellent football, free-flowing, attacking football. There was so much conviction about our play, so much energy, so much pressing, so much unity on the field, to now it's all just crumbling a bit. We're not seeing the same focus, clarity in the mind of these players out there. What on earth has gone wrong? And again, you have to look at the fixture list. We have to look here about the magnitude of games that come. It's a lot. There's no escaping that here. And I'm not saying that we're the only team who has to play a lot of games. So many teams do, but so many teams are also struggling. Every single team this season has had a period whereby, maybe apart from Liverpool, it's gotten a bit difficult. It's gotten a bit tough, to actually make your way through the number of games that we have. And also with Barca, you can't forget this either, we've had a lot more away games in the second half of the season because, of course, we hope to return home. We're having more home games in that period. So we start the season here more away. We've had some really tricky away trips, and that hasn't helped. But again, guys, I go back to the fact here that we do not have quality squad depth. Now, we keep saying it over and over and over, and of course it's not changing because we can't change anything about it right now until January at the earliest, but I would also just pay some real attention here to the returning players from injury, because even though we have players now back in our squad, back available from those injury problems, for me it's becoming very, very clear it doesn't mean they're actually back as we know them to be, the players that we knew before they were out. Because even Gavi, for an example there, I think there's been time since he's been back where he has looked good, where he has looked very energetic and, much like his old self. But there are also times where you can see he's still getting it together. It is still going to take a lot of time. He's been out for an entire year. That is a lifetime in football. It's obviously going to take time. And you look at Frenkie de Jong as well, he is not the same player that we saw before. We don't know what's going on with him right now. Apparently after the game against Betis, there was a real emotional fallout from him. He felt very, very down after the game, quite broken in many ways, according to the media. So quite clearly, Frenkie, physically, mentally right now, he is not there. He is absolutely not there. And that means when we make subs in games, again, more often than not, we get worse as a team. We try and rotate, we try and rest players, we try and choose specific moments to do that, but we get worse and we suffer as a result of having to rely on players outside the starting 11. Because even somebody, guys, let's be honest here, like Ferran Torres, okay, he scored at the weekend against Betis, but one goal doesn't take away from the fact it was another very, very average performance from him. Look at his overall game. I know he scored and I know goals are important, but if you're looking at the quality of the performance, he is not there. He is not at the standard that we require, that we need, and somebody that should be playing lots and lots and lots of minutes coming off the bench. Again, it's not somebody that I would say is quality depth, which is when we come to some of these real debates right now within the Barca fan base, and I'm really interested to know, what your thoughts are. It's really important here that we give our opinions, and ultimately, we understand where we are as a fan base as well as a club right now, because looking at that squad depth then, guys, what would you actually do to address it in the near term? Looking there at the January transfer window, as of right now, we don't know what we can do. We don't know what we're going to be able to do in the transfer market. But in an ideal world, what would you actually do? In January, are there players out there that could be signed in that month, that could be maybe brought in for a decent amount, maybe even loan deals or something, to actually help our depth and to give us a push and to give our squad a real boost there, moving into a really important second half of the season? Because in my opinion, I think we have to do something in January. I think for the fact that we're even talking about this now, we're still quite early on. If we're talking about lack of depth now, and all of our injured players, they're back, it's not as though we've got a load of players out injured right now. We've got a few to come back, but this is mainly what we have. The squad that you see here before us, these are our options, and I just don't think it's enough for the whole season, and to certainly challenge on all of the fronts, I think we have to act. But the question is, what could we actually do in January? But there's plenty more as well. There's plenty more debate happening right now, because I would ask the question here of, has La Liga itself there, the league here that we find ourselves playing in, have they had any influence on our drop points in the league this season? I'm particularly looking at the stretch here whereby we've had one win from our last 5 La Liga games. Is there any part of that that is La Liga's responsibility, that they have influenced the game in a poor way, in a bad way, through bad decisions, of course? We've seen lots of refereeing controversy. Do you feel as though La Liga is in any way responsible? Because for me, we shouldn't blame it. It's not an excuse for us, because let me just say, earlier on in the season, we were so good, our level was so high, it didn't matter what they did. That was the beauty of it. We were so good, we were so electric, we were so convincing that not even the La Liga refs could stop us. And unfortunately, and it's not right, I'm not excusing it, but unfortunately, that's what we have to do. And it's a joke, really, that we have to. It's a joke here that we play in a league that seems to be constantly making our life difficult, on the field, off the field, in every single way. But as Barca fans, as fans of the club for as long as we have been, we know how things work here. We understand how the league works, and as a result of that, we have to be better. And it's unfortunate, like I say, but we just do. Which brings us on to the style, which brings us on to the tactics of Hansi Flick. And the question that's being asked is it possible to play the high line, to play the way that we want to play with the demands that takes in terms of organisation, in terms of pressing? Is it possible to play that style every 3 days? Is it possible to do that with the fixtures that we have? And the way that modern football is nowadays, can you hold that level for that amount of time, for that amount of games? And as a result, in some games, should Hansi Flick change? Now, it's something that I've said right throughout his time with the club. I do not expect him to do that. I do not expect Flick to change his ways, to change his style, to change his philosophy. He is not that guy. But should he? Is there a feeling right now that these demands cannot be sustained? And let me just ask this as well, because with Araujo returning very, very soon, with Christensen not far behind him, looking at the defensive side of our team, looking at where we have been susceptible recently, our defensive structure has looked weak, it's looked very vulnerable, I feel. Is there any possibility of changing shape? With these players returning, with a lot more quality adding there to the back line, could we see at any point 3 centre-backs? Would that help to solidify things? Would that help there to just give us more of a base, more of a solid base and foundation to build from? We know how important the defensive line is. We know how that can really make or break your team. So is there any chance, maybe not of changing the high line, maybe not of changing the tactics, but maybe looking at the structure of our defence? Is there any way that we could tweak things to help us in that department? That's also one for you to certainly let me know your thoughts on, which is when we do move on to one of the biggest questions of all. Basically, with all of that in mind there, the fixtures, the demands, the style, how much all of this is weighing on our squad and on our whole club right now, and especially if we're not able to do what we need to do in January, perhaps, my question would be, at some stage, are we going to have to prioritise? At some stage this season, are we going to have to say, okay, our focus is either La Liga or the Champions League? Are we not going to be really able to apply ourselves to the maximum in every game, in every single competition? Because again, guys, and I've said it before on the channel here, I think Flick is already prioritising the Champions League. You only have to look again at the weekend. Rafinha and Olmo are taken off there after an hour away at Betis at only 1-0 up. I mean, that says to me already, you're thinking about Wednesday. You're thinking about the Champions League. Away at Betis is a really hard game. 1-0 is by no means a decent lead there. And we're taking off 2 of our most influential players in that game. And let me just say, looking at La Liga, looking at the Champions League, in terms of which would you rather? And I know it's not a choice that we want to make, that we honestly want to stand up and say, oh, we have to prioritise one or the other. But if I had to ask you, La Liga or the Champions League, look, we've won La Liga plenty of times, let's be honest. Over the last decade, we have been La Liga winners fairly often. And every single time it feels like that we've actually won the league, by the way, Real Madrid have either gone deep or they've won the Champions League. And then it was almost devalued. It was almost as though, okay, you've won the league, you've won the domestic competition there, but we've won the Champions League, where everybody's competing, the big one, we've won it. And although I certainly still believe that, look, winning a league title, winning La Liga, it still shows the most consistent teams. It still shows who was best over the course of an entire season, and it's the hardest thing to win. That consistency, as we're seeing, is very, very difficult to do. But the one we really want right now, we have waited year upon year upon year, it's the Champions League. I don't think you'd find many Barcelona fans who said, I'd rather win La Liga than the Champions League this season. We have not won the Champions League since 2015. We have embarrassed ourselves in that competition, and we have not even had a deep run. We've not even shown really that we've been close to winning it since then in many, many ways. And the thing about this team right now, this Hansi Flick team, looking at the game against Dortmund, we're going to see a lot because it has the potential to play at these peak levels. You know, we saw that against Bayern. We saw that against Real Madrid. Back in October, we were able to go big in the biggest of games and actually play at a level that would threaten any team in the world. Because at our best, I still maintain this Barca team has quality. It has real attacking quality, especially, and we can hurt any team. Now, can we do that every 3 days? Can we do that over the course of an entire season to that level with nothing in between? That's going to be tough. That is still up for debate right now. But in terms of going for those biggest games, and that is why for me, this Dortmund game, it is massive for Barca because we still need to prove now that we can go big, that we can reach that peak level, that ultimately it still exists. Yeah, we saw us win back in October against Bayern, back-to-back against Real Madrid in that period. No doubt that period alone took a lot out of the team, but can we still do that? You know, we're 2 months on, nearly here. We're moving now, week upon week upon week, thinking, is that Barca still there? Is that Barca still alive? Well, we got a massive test here. We go away to Borussia Dortmund. It's a big Champions League game. It's third against fourth. These are the games we show our level. These are the games where we show the peak of what we can do. And ultimately, that is going to be vital. That is going to decide our season in terms of the Champions League. Are we ready to win it? Are we ready here to put our name firmly in the hat? Let's see on Wednesday. Let's see if Barca can still dominate on the biggest stage. So those there, guys, were indeed many of the questions right now and many of the debates that we are having about this Barcelona team. I think they are quite a confusing team right now. You know, one game you think they're flying, they're really hitting the high notes again, and in the next game you're thinking, what on earth has happened? Where have half our players gone? But like I say, that is why Wednesday, it is a big game, and we are going to be building up bigly to that on the channel tomorrow, guys. So please do let me know your thoughts on lots of the questions that we've had right here today. Thank you indeed for all of your great support, and indeed for sticking with me here. I will catch you soon for all of the big content to come. But until next time, as always, Vejka, here Barca.